Have you ever wondered about the different types of variables used in research and why they are important? Well, let's dive right in. Variables in research are characteristics or properties that can vary. They are studied to observe their effects or relationships. The two main types of variables you'll come across are independent and dependent variables. The independent variable is the one that is manipulated or controlled by the researcher. Think of it as the cause or predictor in a study. For example, in a research on the impact of managerial styles on employee productivity, the managerial style would be the independent variable. On the other hand, the dependent variable is the one observed or measured. It's the outcome or response. In our example, employee productivity would be the dependent variable. These two variables form the basis of an experiment, but there are many other types of variables that researchers consider. Beyond independent and dependent variables, we have categorical and continuous variables. What are these? Well, let's delve into it. Categorical variables are those that represent categories or groups. Think of them as the labels that we use to classify and group data. For instance, in the realm of business operations, if we're analyzing customer demographics, variables like gender, ethnicity, or even customer type, such as new, returning, or loyal, would all be categorical variables. These can be further divided into nominal and ordinal variables. Nominal variables are categorical variables with categories that have no inherent order. Going back to our customer demographics example, gender and ethnicity are nominal variables. There's no rank, order, or hierarchy among the categories. On the other hand, ordinal variables are categorical variables with categories that do have a meaningful order, but no consistent intervals. Let's say we're looking at customer satisfaction ratings. These could be classified as poor, fair, good, excellent. Here, the order matters, but the difference between fair and good isn't necessarily the same as between good and excellent. Now let's talk about continuous variables. These are variables that can take any value within a given range. If we're tracking sales revenue over time, the revenue figure is a continuous variable. It could be any value within the possible range of revenue the business can generate. Continuous variables can be split into interval and ratio variables. Interval variables have consistent intervals between values but no true zero point. For instance, if we're measuring the temperature of a warehouse in Celsius or Fahrenheit, that's an interval variable. Ratio variables, however, do have a true zero point, and the ratios between values are meaningful. In our sales revenue example, that's a ratio variable. If the business makes zero sales, that means no income was generated. And if the business made $2,000 one day and $4,000 the next, it's accurate to say the revenue doubled. And there you have it. Categorical and continuous variables provide researchers with the flexibility to analyze a wide range of data. Control and extraneous variables play critical roles in the research process, but what are they? Let's dive in. Imagine you're a business researcher studying the impact of a new advertising campaign on sales. The independent variable is the advertising campaign, while the dependent variable is the sales. Control variables are those you keep constant to isolate the effect of the advertising campaign. For instance, you might control for market conditions or the time of year. By holding these constant, you can confidently attribute any change in sales to the new advertising campaign, not other factors. On the other hand, extraneous variables are those unintended variables that might influence your sales. This could be a sudden economic downturn or a competitor's marketing blitz. These variables introduce error or bias, so researchers aim to account for or control these to maintain the validity of the study. By managing control and extraneous variables, researchers can ensure their findings are valid and reliable. Finally, we have moderator and mediator variables. These variables help us understand the nuances of the relationships we're studying. First, let's talk about moderator variables. These are the variables that influence the strength or direction of the relationship between the independent and the dependent variables. A good way to picture this is to imagine a tug of war. The independent variable and the dependent variable are the two teams on either end of the rope. The moderator variable is like the ground they're standing on. If it's a smooth, flat surface, the team with the most strength will likely win. But if it's a slippery slope, even the strongest team might struggle. In the context of business operations, consider this example. We might be studying the relationship between training and employee performance. Here, training is the independent variable and employee performance is the dependent variable. But the relationship between these two might be influenced by a third variable, employee motivation. If an employee is highly motivated, they might perform well even with less training. On the other hand, A demotivated employee might not show improvement even with extensive training. So, employee motivation acts as a moderator variable. Now let's move on to mediator variables. These variables explain the process or mechanism through which the independent variable affects the dependent variable. Think of it as a bridge that connects two islands, the independent and dependent variables. Again, in a business setting, imagine we're studying the relationship between service quality and customer loyalty. Service quality is the independent variable and customer loyalty is the dependent variable. Now, it might be that customer satisfaction is a mediator variable here. High-quality service might lead to high customer satisfaction, which in turn leads to increased customer loyalty. The mediator variable, customer satisfaction, helps us understand why and how service quality affects customer loyalty. Understanding moderator and mediator variables allows researchers to delve deeper into the relationships between variables and draw more nuanced conclusions. So, there you have it. A brief overview of the different types of variables in research. We've covered independent and dependent variables, the key players in any research study. We've delved into categorical variables, which represent categories or groups, and continuous variables, those that can take any value within a given range. We've also explored control variables, which are kept constant to isolate the effect of the independent variable, and extraneous variables, those unintended ones that may introduce error or bias. Lastly, we've looked at moderator and mediator variables, which help us understand the strength, direction, or mechanism of the relationship between the independent and dependent variables. Each type of variable has its unique role and importance in research, and understanding them is like learning the language of research. Remember, understanding and appropriately handling these variables is crucial for conducting rigorous and valid research. Until next time, keep researching and keep learning.